A new week, a new club, and a new guest. This is the Go Podcast. Hello everyone and welcome back to the GOAT Podcast. We've now finished our Everton mini-series. We're on to our second club, and for the next month we're going to be looking at Liverpool FC, which I know Tom's very happy about, as you can imagine. So we've got some great guests to give us their views on who they believe is Liverpool's greatest player of all time. We hope you enjoy the episodes. The first episode we recorded quite a while ago. We've had a few recordings that we've just sort of been stashing away, really. So this was recorded a while back, actually back before Christmas. But we hope you enjoy it. We think we've got a great guest to kick off the Liverpool mini-series. And yeah, that's it really. Enjoy. Let us know what you think of the episode once you've listened to it. Let's dive in. This is our first episode of our Liverpool Club series.
Hello and welcome back to the Go Podcast. We're eventually, and I'm really happy to say, we're into Series 2. I feel looking at it now, we couldn't have went with any other club really. It would have been either Liverpool or Newcastle, but we've gone with the champions of England at the moment, and they've had such a period of success, haven't they, the past 3 or 4 years under Jurgen Klopp, and I'm happy to say, and I'm delighted to say, that we've got a fantastic guest with us today, none other than the Liverpool Echo's Joe Rimmer, who I worked with a little bit last year, doing a bit of work experience at the Echo with, and he kind of took me under his wing, and hopefully, I think most Liverpool fans will know Joe, and hopefully be a great addition on today's podcast. So yeah, welcome to Joe. How are you doing?
Evening, gents. Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, as well as I can be during these strange lockdown times, but yeah. Football's funny at the moment, isn't it? Liverpool are dropping like flies with the injuries they're getting, but
I think we're on to our second back four now, aren't we, Joe? Which is a strange set of events.
I was going to ask you both actually, boys. At what point do you two get the call up for centre half? Because you can't be that far away from it. Looking at,
I think Joe's higher up in the pecking order than me, so I think he might get the call before me.
I don't think I'll be winning any headers at 5'7" anyway. So
I'm the same as you. I can't move though, Joe. I'm a bit crocked with my ankle, so might be yourself and Sean Bradbury, I think, taking the reins at
Sean can get on my shoulders, and maybe between us we'll make it bang.
Yeah, well, that's the state of Liverpool currently, unfortunately, and hopefully things improve for Liverpool in that sense. But I think it's the case at the moment that we're dealing with an unprecedented season, really, aren't we? And I think that I'll definitely go down in history, I think, this campaign and the last. And I think before we dive into things, kind of how's it been for you covering this? Because it's, obviously we had this fantastic period where under Jurgen Klopp, where we've, won all there is to be won, really. But then we've gone into this separate period, really, of very strange times. How's that been for you?
This year has been very weird. 2019 was just absolutely awesome. Best year of my career so far. Some of those games, Barcelona, then Madrid, and then the first half of what is a wonderful season was just absolutely awesome. Yeah, it was really, really a highlight. And then obviously this year has been so strange with lockdown. Watching them win the title was special, but it probably wasn't. I think it's fair to say it wasn't as special as we all would have liked it to have been. And it's I don't know. There's a. I want to see them go and win it again now, because I think there's as great as winning the title was, there's a tinge of sadness there. I think to not do it in front of fans, and still, 6 months on, we're still waiting for them to be able to celebrate that title with any fans is tough. And they're probably not going to be able to celebrate. I know there's been talk of open top bus stores and stuff like that around the city, but I just really can't see that happening. You know, the way things are, unless the world changes very suddenly. Something sad about it. So, it's been a great year, and I'm not going to complain. At the end of the day, I've been waiting, pretty much a lifetime. I was born in '88, so the last one was in 1990. I wasn't old enough to really remember. So I've been waiting a lifetime for it. They're finally champions of England. We should enjoy it, but there's now something that I hope drives Liverpool on to go and win it again, because I think it would be 10 times as special if they could win it again in front of a packed Anfield. So it's been a hell of a year, been a strange year in terms of work, but I'd say 2019 was the pinnacle. Nothing to European Cup. I think that's 20 million miles. So that was great.
Yeah, and I think for a journalist to cover that as well is just dream come true, really, isn't it? And you've been lucky enough to do that. But like you touch upon there, it's been tinged with a bit of, looking back on it now, a bit of sadness, a bit of regret a little bit that we haven't been able to celebrate it, I think, as we know we would have in Liverpool. But hopefully we go and win the title again this year. And I think despite the injury problems that we've got at the minute, I still think we're in with a good shot of doing that. But yeah, I think without further ado, Jack, I think we should jump into the new format, which I think will be a surprise to our regular listeners. But I think in order to get the most kind of answers and the most kind of analysis out of our guests in the new format, I think this is the right change for us. And I think first up, we're going to go through who your nomination would be for the greatest ever Liverpool player. I think for me, when I was looking at this, I knew that this would be very much a generational thing, and I think that there's certain people who were sort of the statespeople of Liverpool Football Club. I'm speaking the likes of Kenny Dalglish, who forever will be held in that esteem. But obviously there's in more recent times the likes of Steven Gerrard, who has come very close, if not surpassed him. So I was wondering what you kind of made of that, Joe.
Well, I think that's it. Absolutely spot on. That's exactly it. I think to be the greatest player in the eyes of any fan, you have to tick a number of different boxes. Obviously, talent is one, but longevity, service, trophies, different things like that. Performances in big games, all are big criteria. So, for me, it is Steven Gerrard. I mean, anyone of my generation. He could do everything, and he was just a joy to watch. He was a force of nature in his prime, and he scored some goals now that if you go back and watch them, go and watch them on YouTube. I think we took them for granted almost at the time. I remember ones away at Newcastle where they took a free kick and he smashes it into the top corner, away at Marseille, obviously in the FA Cup final. Some of the home ones, the Middlesbrough one that's been played over and over again. He scored awesome goals. He scored in every major final, didn't he? He turned up on every big occasion, and then he conducted himself on and off the pitch. He conducted himself so well. It was a credit to the club, credit to himself, credit to the city, and just everything about his story is, I think, encapsulates why he is the greatest for me. And again, we talked about a tinge of sadness before. There's a tinge of sadness that he never won a league, but I don't think that takes away from the fact that he was just hands down the greatest player of. I think even fans that would say perhaps Kenny Dalglish would be up there. I think they'd even argue that Steven Gerrard probably even just shades it. I just think for everything he's done. I think on pure talent, you look at Luis Suarez. Luis Suarez was again a force of nature and someone who could score any sort of goal, work so hard. But I think Suarez, on terms of longevity, obviously wasn't there long enough, and then some of the things he obviously did off the pitch and on the pitch, I should say. Maybe strike against him, but I think Gerrard. What can you say about Steven Gerrard? Hasn't already been said. He is just an awesome player. I'm interested to know what fans outside of Liverpool would say about Gerrard. Perhaps certain things with England, the people hold that to a high regard and assess him on that. But I love Steven Gerrard, love the man, and he's turned into a decent little manager as well, isn't he?
He's doing well up in Scotland now.
So proving himself.
You never really, I don't think, that like as someone of an outsider from the city of Liverpool, but I've never can't think of another example of one player carrying the weight of a whole city for as long a period as Gerrard did, and touched on it before, but it's he didn't play in a great Liverpool team as some of the other potential contenders we could talk about today, and I think that has to weigh heavily in his favour.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at some of the teams he did play in, and they're some of the poorest Liverpool teams of recent times. So, he dragged the team and he dragged the club. And you know what? I think it weighed heavy on him at times, because I think if you look back at 2014 and the slip, and a lot was made of it. I was listening to a podcast with him the other day, the Peak Performance podcast.
With Jake Humphrey.
It was interesting.
Yeah.
And it was interesting listening to him talk about it, because you can see that weighs still so heavy on him, and it shouldn't do, because one slip should not overshadow what was just the most phenomenal career. And you could tell that this was a guy who went into every game feeling like, I need to win this game for Liverpool, and more often than not he did that, didn't he? So he was just, he obviously had the brief flirtation with Chelsea at one point, but he was a one club man. You can't really blame him for that, for the way the team was at the time. And he stayed, and his legacy will hold for a long time. I'll tell my grandchildren about it. They will probably watch old clips of him if YouTube's still around, and tell their grandchildren. So he was one hell of a player, and really pleased to see him do well as a manager, because you know what, there's another part of me that really, really hopes, just love it, if he came back and won the league with Liverpool as a manager.
It'd just feel right, wouldn't it? Yeah.
It would just feel
definitely
all kinds of right, wouldn't it? That is my big hope. Big hope for him.
Yeah. I think that's the same for every Liverpool fan, really, every die-hard Liverpool fan, because I think the heartbreak of 2014 was the end of that sort of Roy of the Rovers aspect to Steven Gerrard, where it almost felt poetic that he was going to win that league title that had evaded him towards the back end of his career. He'd won everything else in a Liverpool shirt, and like you touched upon, he'd scored in every major final, which I think is a record that's never been equalled. So, in that sense, he was the ultimate big game player, and he did carry Liverpool Football Club throughout that period, and teams like you've both touched upon that maybe don't hold anything to the teams that went before and since. So I think in that sense, I think you're right to say, the phenomenon that was Steven Gerrard, it comes out of that, really, doesn't it? Of how much he had to carry in that time. And I think there won't be any arguments from me on that count. I think for fans of an older generation, obviously, like we touched upon before, Kenny always comes into the argument. What would be your opinion on that? Obviously, you can wake up on the other side of the bed one day and think, oh, it's Kenny, or maybe someone else, maybe John Barnes or Luis Suarez, like you touched upon there. What do you think it is, the kind of deciding factor between Kenny and Gerrard?
I think Kenny is a couple of things. I think one, the trophies they won during his era. He came, they won European Cups, they won leagues, they won pretty much everything there was to win. And then he became a manager and managed and played in one of the most attractive teams that won everything domestically, didn't they? So I think it's a couple of things. Obviously I didn't see him play, I've watched clips, and I think the poise, his style was very attractive. And I've only got to go off to what my dad would tell me about him, and some of the players they had, like you just mentioned, John Barnes. My dad used to love Graham Souness. They had Alan Hansen, Mark Lawrence, and so many great players. Kevin Keegan before Kenny. that Kenny keeps coming out on top probably tells you as much as you need to know, you know. So I think the managing side of things as well, you know, heightens his legacy even further. So, you know, but then I know people that say John Barnes. Again, I saw John Barnes when he'd sort of converted to a more defensive player. But John Barnes, you know, in his prime, I mean, you know, people that say that he was the best they ever saw. My dad, as mentioned, Graham Souness, my dad loved him as a captain. And, you know, there's so many to talk about, isn't there? You know, so I think with Kenny, it's that legacy and the management thing even pushes him even further. So that's again why, you know, I mentioned before, it'd be great to see Steven Gerrard manage the success, because to do it as a player, I think that's probably even not. Kenny probably doesn't get the credit he deserves for, you know, if Steven Gerrard took over Liverpool now and didn't particularly do very well, people would hold it against him, wouldn't they? And they would almost, he would almost be mocked by rival fans for not doing well as a manager. You know, Lampard's taking a big risk with his Chelsea legacy, and you know, fair play to them, they must have something that drives them, because to do that, you know, it's a dangerous game, isn't it? So I think for Kenny to go and do that, he'd never managed before, to become a player manager and then manage them for such a successful period is pretty much unheard of, isn't it? So, you know, I think that heightens his legacy even further. But I mean, never saw him play, so I can't comment from my own personal point of view. But trust me, my dad's told me enough times to hammer home the point that he was a wonderful, wonderful player.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of going off. Me and Jack were sort of, we grew up in that period where it was kind of the crossover point of like pre-digital, if you like. So we still had the VHS tapes that I'm sure, you know, people before us kind of grew up watching as well. So we got to watch kind of John Barnes, Souness, like you say, Kenny, and they all look like modern footballers playing against, you know, your archetypal 70s, 80s type players. And I think that's the point I'd make on them, that, you know, people often make the point, could they play now, could they not? I think the closest argument you're ever going to get that they can is the fact that they look like modern footballers, particularly John Barnes to me. He often looks like he transcends the game. And I was watching, it was funny, just before, it was on ITV4, I think, the game against Arsenal in '89. It's probably not the best example for in John Barnes' career, but even in that game, as many people have commented before, he had a phenomenal game, didn't he? And he looks like a modern footballer in that game. He's probably one of the most incredible players to watch, even now, I'd say.
Do you think on sheer like ability, if it was just down to ability alone, gents, just start talking on like not necessarily influence or longevity of career, but pure ability, Barnes would be hard to beat, because that's what it seems like from an outside point of view. Possibly.
If you're just talking pure ability, I must admit Suarez for me was just phenomenally talented. There wasn't anything he couldn't do. You know, he could pass, he could shoot, he could head the ball, and then you added the work rate to it. I still think, you know, everything I said about longevity, I still think Steven Gerrard on pure ability, again, he could do pretty much everything. But yeah, John Barnes, I think what you said there, Tom, was a great point, because watching him, he did transcend. He did look like a modern player playing in a, you know, for us in a non-modern game. So absolutely. I think that's a good point. I think you could say the same about Kenny. You could say the same about Hansen and the way he played football, and Souness as well. So definitely. But if it was ability, I think John Barnes would be in the argument. Suarez would perhaps be in the argument. But I still think those players mentioned, Kenny, Gerrard, they're still in the argument as well, because of, you know, the ability matched with everything else.
Yeah, I mean, I think people, and I think Jack, you'll sort of be able to chip in with this as well, just as an outsider looking in. Do you think now that maybe younger fans don't quite see the ability that Steven Gerrard had as a footballer? You know, the range of passing. Sometimes we hear a lot about David Beckham, quite rightly. He was a great passer of the ball in comparison to Trent now. But I often think in that argument, do people not mention Gerrard enough? That his range of passing, you know, aside from the goals and the stuff we know about Steven Gerrard, is that maybe missed a little bit? The part of his game that maybe you don't see on highlight reels anymore. You know, is that part of it for outsiders now maybe overlooked a little bit?
I think that's definitely a huge part of it, Tom, and that ability to just turn a game, even in the latter stages of his career, when he was playing that slightly deeper role and sort of quarterback in the team, almost, you still saw his influence on the team. You know, the way they got the most in that season where he came so close to win the league, I think they got the most out of Sterling and Sturridge and Suarez, was their runs into space were like, you know, really pushing the envelope, but they were only able to be found because there was an incredible passer of the football behind them who was able to pick them out. And I mean, I know a lot of people rave a lot about Xabi Alonso's passing ability, and rightly so. But for me, I'd have Steven Gerrard's passing ability as you know, perhaps only equalled by Paul Scholes from what I've seen in the Premier League era. Just that, and it wasn't all about necessarily like the long range picking somebody out like Hollywood type pass. It was often like the just playing pace into feet, you know, short, quick, making the team play at a higher tempo. That is what I think Gerrard was the complete master of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree, and I think it is overlooked, unfortunately, in this kind of era that we have now, social media and that sort of thing. Maybe we miss the sort of the aspects of his game that maybe don't make, you know, highlight reels, like I say. So yeah, I think it's a great nomination from Joe, and there won't be any arguments from my side, I don't think. I don't know about yourself, Jack. What do you kind of think? I know we keep going back to it outside looking in, but would that be your opinion as well, that Steven Gerrard is our greatest ever footballer?
Well, I think I completely agree. I think it's hard to argue the other way. Purely, you know, if we break it down into ability, influence, trophies, and overall career, like longevity, basically, he's ticking all the boxes, isn't he, Gerrard? Like, I mean, I suppose that, you know, completely Dalglish, Barnes, and Hansen probably are as well. And I like to bring Hansen into the debate, just because I think as we do this series, the listeners will learn. You know, I won't like defenders getting overlooked just purely. They often are, aren't they? In these debates, defenders get overlooked quite easily. But for me, it's very hard to put a case together against Gerrard, and I think the fact it speaks volumes that I know he didn't leave. He was at Liverpool basically throughout his whole career until he went to America at the end. But I think the fact that he had that incident and was so close to leaving Chelsea, and at the time that obviously really split the fan base. But the fact he still comes out on top of these lists compiled together, I think that just speaks volumes of how loved he is by the fans, and completely why he's got to be right in there as the greatest player of all time to play for the club.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that rounds off that section quite nicely, and I'm glad that Joe nominated Steven Gerrard, because I think that would be my opinion on the matter as well. I was really looking forward to this section. I know Jack is as well. We're looking into the greatest cult hero as well, Joe. So if you've got a nomination for that, we'd love to hear that as well.
See, I've been stewing on this. I think it's quite difficult, because I think cult hero means different things to different people. But to some people, it's almost not a very good player who people liked anyway. So like Igor Biscan for Liverpool, you know, someone, you know, I very much remember he wasn't great, had a few good games, had a bit of a strange persona about him, and obviously was in a team that ended up winning the European Cup. So you know, he sort of had this gathering and this following around him. But it's a difficult one, you know. I think I'd be remiss not to mention my strange love of Emil Heskey.
Yeah. I thought he was going to come off.
Well, he has to, and I was thinking, if you look at this question, he might encapsulate what a cult hero is to me. You know, not quite like Biscan, because I think, you know, and I would argue with anyone till I was blue in the face that Heskey was a better player and a good player for Liverpool. But he had qualities that I liked. You know, what I liked about Heskey is that he got a lot of stick and he never complained. And he never went out into the papers and did any silly interviews. You never saw him moan about it on the pitch or down tools. He got on with it and did the job that he was asked to do. And in my opinion, he did it well. And I liked that about him. And he sort of, to me, he was the underdog. That whilst everyone was looking at Fowler, Owen, even the likes of Lippman, when he was there, Heskey was there doing a job and doing it well and helping Liverpool win trophies. And, he was just someone that the younger me sort of really liked, and that's carried on. I've met him a few times, and he's a really, really nice bloke as well. So it kind of adds into it. Well, he won't be my nomination because I'm trying to think of a sort of clear cult hero, someone that I think others would perhaps agree with. It's not something that's just personal to me. So I'm going to go for Gary McAllister because Gary McAllister was a player who arrived at Liverpool. For most people, well over the hill. It was a shock. He comes in from Coventry. Was someone that was in his prime 10 years before arriving at Liverpool, and just took a team that lacked that edge, that lacked that experience, and launched them into a contender. They became a team that was playing for trophies, and he had everything that a cult hero could have. He had that likability, that character, the strangeness in terms of the age and the transfer, and then great moments, and the greatest moment of all being the Everton derby with that free kick.
I still see Julio's face now. I don't know about you. I still see it now.
It's the grin, isn't it? And that everything about it, the shocked grin from Julio. Sammy Lee running on the pitch. McAllister almost looking as if to say, I can't believe that worked out.
He couldn't believe it.
Gerrard.
Yeah.
And so that to me is a cult hero. There's been others. Do you count Lucas Leiva as a cult hero? If you do, then I would say Lucas. Really liked him. Thought he was a very good player. Again, someone who got a lot of stick.
Good servant. Yeah.
Didn't deserve it. Good servant. Mamadou Sakho was probably a cult hero. But McAllister for me. Interested to hear your take on what you think a cult hero is and who fits the profile. But I do think it's a difficult one to sum up.
Yeah, I mean,
what were you thinking on that, Jack?
Well, I was only going to say it's. I suppose it's similar to our whole series of the GOAT. It's like the greatest people defined differently. I like to go with those 4 categories I've put together earlier and sort of as a combination. But like Joe says, it's exactly the same with a cult hero. It means different things to different people. I think that's why it'll be good because obviously everyone can interpret it how they want to, and everyone can use their own definition to find their cult heroes. I was going to throw in Dirk Kuyt into the mix.
Great.
I think perhaps
big goals.
Perhaps, maybe even perhaps like Joe was saying, it's perhaps he's too good for that definition of a cult hero. If it's someone who there can almost be that player who's too good to be considered like cult status. But I think in terms of just being a workhorse and I don't know. Was he popular amongst the Anfield crowd at the time? Because always looking from the outside, I always thought, God, he's always there at the big moments in the big games, and he's always a solid 7 or 8 out of 10. He's very, very a good servant for Liverpool, I think.
I think Kuyt's one of those players who's popular now. People look back on him, but I think at the time he had to work very, very hard for that popularity. And I remember many times being at the match and people giving him a hard time. He didn't have the best first touch. He, wasn't the best looking on the ball, but he just came up big on every occasion. You name it, a big game for Liverpool, whether that be Man United, Everton, Arsenal, Chelsea. He pretty much scored or contributed in all of those games.
Yeah.
And Man City away scored the last minute winner. Had some big moments in the season. They came very close and came second. Scored in the Champions League final, albeit a losing effort. But I do think you have to work very, very hard for his popularity. So he probably does. You know what? Come to think of it, he would probably be very close for me to a nomination, probably just behind McAllister, because I think he probably does sum up what a cult hero is. But he's someone who's since leaving Liverpool become very popular. I don't think you'll find many people criticise him the way they did when he was there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's always the way. That's like often the way. I think perfectly. The selection of McAllister is great because, like, just from that goal against Everton at Goodison, it's like that would be a massive box ticker for me of cult hero status. Scores in the derby, scores a big goal in a derby. That's what my brain immediately goes to, really. But yeah, so, Tom, do you have anyone you want to? I mean, who else have we overlooked so far?
Well, I'm glad you've mentioned Gary McAllister, because I think it leads on to a wider point really that I wanted to make on that season. And you said about Emile Heskey before, with reference to the 2001 season. I think again that is pretty much overlooked in semi-recent times as a great campaign by an English club to win the 3 cups in the way we did as well. I think we played 64 games that season. It was a big squad, and you think of the players now who came in and made the difference that year. And yeah, the likes of Heskey, I think, I think he scored 22 goals that year, didn't he, in all competitions. Gary Mack, the big goals, I think we could reel off. Likes of Barca, the Tottenham pen. The list is endless really, but it's the contribution that he made that season, I think, does kind of it hits upon kind of cult hero status for them reasons, because I think that it's almost the unlikely, I think, with cult heroes, that you weren't expecting it, and he came in at 35, 36. And also the legacy that he left at Liverpool. You look at the likes of Steven Gerrard, the impact that he had on his career, because obviously he was your nomination for the greatest player. I don't think Stevie would have been the player he turned into, possibly without the influence of Gary Mack, because I think if you look back at his book, he does mention, doesn't he, Steven Gerrard, about the impact on his game. Always going for the Hollywood pass, running a bit too much, maybe the tactical side of his game. And I think McAllister was a big help with that, wasn't he, Joe?
He absolutely was, yeah. Gerrard's made no secret of it, and of course he's one of his coaches now. And I think, I honestly believe that Gary McAllister played such an important part in making that team a team that was perhaps unpolished, as you say, a big squad, but of very different characters, but giving it that winning mentality to go and win those competitions. And you're absolutely right about that season. It's funny in terms of, most people talk about, you talk about Liverpool seasons in, perhaps the 30 years since they won in 1990. Like successful seasons, I think most people will say Istanbul 2019, last season, but that one, I mean, the brilliant moments, the nights, and then those trophies, I mean, how many clubs can boast what Liverpool did? And it was a phenomenal achievement, and I don't think even now, in a wider context, in terms of perhaps what other clubs and perhaps nationally, that's talked about as well as it should be. I think most people look at that team and perhaps Houllier as someone who tried and failed to win the league, but it's not always about that, is it? It has been an obsession for Liverpool, but what they've done in the meantime hasn't been bad, and that was one hell of a season. So yeah, I do think McAllister took the likes of Steven Gerrard and made them into winners. And don't forget, I think, just thinking about it then, you saw about the moments they had with the goals, and it was his free kick that won them the UEFA Cup, that flicked off the head of
the flick on,
the defender, to score the golden goal. So he contributed massively, and again another guy who off the pitch just conducted himself like a Liverpool player should conduct himself. From all accounts, an absolute gentleman, someone who trained hard, looked after himself, and another person who you can be really, really proud that he represented your club. So everything ticks every box, doesn't he? Again, perhaps some people will sit here and say, does he count as a cult hero? Was he a bit too good? Perhaps, but that's just what you define as cult hero.
Yeah, I think for older people as well, David Fairclough is the one that jumps off the page, obviously, with Saint Etienne in 77. And I think, like we've said today, it's kind of it's when a player surprises you a little bit and maybe comes up with a moment that maybe you was never expecting, and I guess that fits in with that. And Liverpool go on from that moment, and it is a seminal moment in the history of the club. There's no doubt about that. But I think for people of a younger age, I think certainly the likes of Gary McAllister, I was going to throw in Jerzy Dudek for the '05 heroics. But I think the only drawback on that is that, one, he didn't play many games after, because Pepe Reina was brought in the next season. And I think secondly, prior to that, I think if I remember back, I mean, his record before that wasn't great, but he wrote his name into the history books, didn't he, in '05? So I guess that would be my nomination. But I think Gary Mack, listening to you there, I think is a very good nomination, and I can't really argue with that again, I'd say.
Yeah, Jerzy Dudek's a good shout. So I think what all of these cult heroes have about them as well is that quality that that they don't give up, do they? They face difficult moments, and McAllister had to come in and face the fact that many people thought, why have they signed him, and proved himself. Dudek did have some difficult moments. I was sitting right in line with the game when he dropped Forlan's, the ball between his legs for Forlan to score, and that was a moment that would finish many players off. You look at some of the goalkeepers United have. When Taibbi did it, that was the end of his United career.
Yeah.
Dudek carried on, fought on, and then ended up having a moment that he can live off for the rest of his life, can't he? At Liverpool, he never has to buy a pint in Liverpool ever again because of that moment. And I think a lot of the cult heroes have that about them. Their count was the same. Faced criticism at times. Heskey faced criticism at times, but all of them fought through it. Yeah, I mean, they all have a little bit of that about them, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a good place to round off on that part of the podcast. Before we go, we're going to run through your greatest 11, and we're going to include your greatest manager in that as well. And I just thought, before we start that, we're recording today, and Ray Clemence, unfortunately, we had the news today that he's passed away, and I'd imagine he'll be in your thoughts today for the nomination for greatest goalkeeper. But I think even if you haven't picked him, I think we should kind of mention the influence he had in that team. I think he's one of the few players that kind of straddled the Shankly and Paisley teams, and I think that gets forgotten about a little bit because he left in '81 for Tottenham. But a great servant for Liverpool, and other than maybe Elijah Scott, I don't know whether he's come into your thinking, or maybe Alisson towards more recent times. I think Ray Clemence is certainly one of our greats, whether he makes the team or not.
I didn't say it, but I think Ray Clemence would be the greatest goalkeeper Liverpool have ever had. For the things he's won, the things he did with the club. Again, he's someone that you talked about before, modern, ahead of his time, was a sweeper keeper before sweeper keepers were very much a thing. And again, he's someone that my dad's told me all about. And the other thing I'd like to mention, I know Paul Gorst interviewed him not so long ago. Everyone that I've ever spoken to who's ever dealt with Ray Clemence has spoken about what wonderful gentleman he was. Really, really sad day, because he is a bona fide Liverpool legend. He's a football legend. He's someone that won everything there was to win, and and a gentleman as well. So, really, really sad day, and thoughts with his family and the friends, because he's a great player, great man.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the time has come for us to run through your best 11 then. Before we do that, who would be your greatest manager then? Because I think we've been lucky enough to witness, I think, 3 or 4 managers in our lifetime, and I think the ones from that time kind of stand out, who you pick from that time. But I'd be interested to know who you've gone for.
Well, look, I'm going to pick a team for the players that I've watched. I don't think there's any point in me picking. Bob Paisley's Liverpool's greatest ever manager. I think the trophy record speaks for itself. Bill Shankly, probably the greatest ever influence on the club. But I can't pick them because I never saw their teams play. So just talking about the managers that in my lifetime. The thing is, this recent modern Liverpool team is going to dominate now, because because of what I've seen. So Jurgen Klopp is my manager. You don't win the big two like that and not get the nod for manager. I loved Rafa Benitez. Someone who loved Rafa Benitez at the time. You know, really would argue with anyone. I always remember going away to uni and, you know, you'd meet a lot of people from different places. A lot of people didn't like Rafa Benitez away from Liverpool. There was always questions about him. There seemed to be pressure on him and doubts about him. But I thought, you know, once a big game, you know, at the chips falling, the guy only team won the league. Liverpool, you know, a bit more money to spend. He would have been Liverpool. Great manager. Again, a great representative of the club. Loved Houllier as well for what he brought. You know, Houllier was someone who, I'd say Houllier firmed up my interest in football. You know, under Evans, I was a bit younger, and you look at the play. It was more about the players. It was more about the goal scorers and the highlights. As you get a bit older, you get more interested in the actual football. And Houllier built a team that I was really interested in watching, and they started winning trophies. And he, you know, he sort of really lit the fires of love for Liverpool for me. So Houllier, definitely a special place, but it has to be Klopp. It has to be Klopp.
Yeah.
You know, what can you say about Klopp that hasn't been said? Great manager, great personality. You know, when he eventually does leave Liverpool, I'm pretty sure there would be some sort of statue or something towards him, because I think he's had that Shankly-like influence as well as winning the. You know, if he doesn't win another trophy, he's won the big two. And I always think people forget about Klopp that. You know what I always want from a team is to be in contention. You know, they don't have to win. I don't think they have to win a league every year or win a European Cup every year to be successful. And if they're getting to finals or just in the shout, and ever since Klopp arrived from his first year, you know, he got to 2 finals in his first season. Then in his first full season, got them into 4th, Champions League final, Champions League win. So, you know, he's basically had Liverpool fighting for success from the moment he walked through the door. So, yeah, it has to be Jurgen Klopp.
Yeah, solid choice. I think there's few that could argue with that for greatest Liverpool manager. Even when you do stick him up against Paisley and Shankly, he's going to be. There's no doubt whenever he decides to call time at Anfield, he's going to be up there with the big boys. No doubt about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if we run through your best 11, then obviously start with the goalkeeper and work your way through. Who have you gone for?
Again, obviously players that I've watched, so it has to be Alisson. It's funny because he was asked me this maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago. The team might look a lot different, but you know, I think about Pepe Reina. Thought he was a great goalkeeper, and you know, there was a couple of seasons there where, you know, I thought he was the best in England, perhaps the best in the world. But Alisson is just a level above. You know, they both had great distribution. Both had a presence about them, but Alisson's is even more assured. You know, all goalkeepers have their moments, all goalkeepers make mistakes, and there's no such thing as a flawless goalkeeper. But a goalkeeper can do something to the rest of the team around them that firms up the whole team. And, you know, I think it's no coincidence that you put Alisson behind, you know, whatever back four, and the back four looks better. And, you know, we'll talk about Van Dijk shortly, spoiler, but we'll talk about him shortly and what he's done for the defence. But Alisson, I mean, it was the same effect. He made a good defence great, and that's what the best goalkeepers do. So it has to be Alisson.
Yeah, I can't argue with that, because I think some of the biggest moments in our recent history, seminal moments definitely have come through Alisson. You think of the Napoli save, for example, in the Champions League run. That is massive. If you want to trail back the chain of events there's no doubt that we're out the competition at that stage, in the group stage, if it wasn't for Alisson. I think if you stick most goalkeepers in the net at that point, you know, it might be Napoli going home with the points, and that would have been the end of that for Liverpool, I think, in the campaign that year. And I think, like you say, he's that level above Pepe Reina, really. I'd say that Pepe Reina was a very good goalkeeper, but I'd say Alisson's changed everything for Liverpool. I'd say, obviously you touched upon Van Dijk there, so I won't go into detail too much, but I think between them two, I think they have been the difference between turning us from a great top 4 team, if you like, to challenging for the major honours every single year. And so yeah, I can't argue with that at all. I think Alisson, yeah, he's a world-class goalkeeper, and we've been crying out for one of them. I think when we had Mignolet, obviously Karius, after Pepe Reina, it was difficult. There was often the case of people kind of saying no goalkeeper would get to that. Was often the quote that kept being said about the likes of Mignolet. And for me that was frustrating, because I feel there are certain goalkeepers who can come up with magic and can have world-class moments. And I think that Alisson, you think of, say, the Napoli save, that's an example of that, where most keepers yet they wouldn't get to that, but he did. And it was, the chain of events after that show you how important a great goalkeeper is to a great side.
Definitely. I mean, look at the Barcelona game. I think people forget about that game. It wasn't this one-sided battering from Liverpool. I think they went a goal up and then they rode the luck for a little while, didn't they? Whilst Barcelona had a bit of a go and they had chances, and Alisson made some saves there that kept Liverpool in the game. And again, that's what great goalkeepers do, don't they? They contribute just as much as the goal scorers in big moments, like you just said. Yeah, he does do that, and he's just a phenomenal goalkeeper. And credit goes to Liverpool for spending that sort of money on a goalkeeper and getting it right, because when you do that, you put yourself out there to be shot at, don't you? You spend that sort of money, people ask questions, but they couldn't have got it more right.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a masterstroke now, and I think, alongside Van Dijk, I think it's changed everything for Liverpool, and it's turned us into the force we are now. So your back four then, I think it'll be an interesting one, because I think across the generations really of the players that we've seen, there's probably some players who might get in this team that maybe people haven't thought of. We've spoken about the 2001 team. I think of the likes of Marcus Babbel, for example, that's completely overlooked, I think, now in the pantheon of players who play for Liverpool. But who have you gone for in your back four?
Yeah, well, again, if you'd asked me a couple of years back, it might have been different. It has to be Trent, doesn't it? But I do think it's worth mentioning some of the people that I think have been very good right backs, which is, I look back, Rob Jones, very good right back, didn't play in a great defensive team. Moving on, Marcus Babbel was a great shout, very, very good player. Really sad, I think, someone whose Liverpool career is very interesting. He obviously had the Julian Barr syndrome, which most people I hadn't heard of before. You probably won't hear much about it since, but he had one great season, that treble season, scored some big goals, scored in the same derby. McAllister scored them. Was a hugely influential player, someone who'd gone and won loads of stuff with Bayern Munich and came to Liverpool on a free transfer and was brilliant. And then struck down with this awful disease. Never really recovered at the highest level. Never really played for Liverpool much again. And, very probably strange career. But great right back. Steve Finnan was a very good right back. I think Steve Finnan was, very steady. Someone who didn't perhaps attract a lot of praise, but served Liverpool well for a good 3 or 4 seasons and didn't really put much of a foot wrong. And then Alvaro Arbeloa, I thought, was a very good right back as well. But Trent has reinvented what a right back's all about, what a full back's all about. He passes the ball better than most players anywhere else on the pitch. Takes set pieces and scores from them. And he's just an awesome player. Scored some big goals, and he's a local lad. So everything about him. Again, another credit to the city. So it's got to be Trent. Again, he's won the big 2 as well. So I mean, I've met Trent. He was brilliant, and I think he's an absolute credit. It's great to see someone from a local lad coming through and playing the team, and I mean, just love everything about it. Yeah, so does have to be Trent.
I mean, he's one of my favourite players in the current Liverpool team. I think he just exudes what Liverpool is about as a city. And also he's a phenomenal player who plays essentially a midfielder's game from right back. And like you say, he's reinvented that position, hasn't he? And I mean, for me, we're pretty much half the team without Trent at times. And it'll be interesting to see what it's going to be like over the next month for Liverpool without him. But yeah, I think a player who already at 21, 22 is pretty much a Liverpool legend, and I don't think many people get to say that at that age.
Definitely.
Yeah. And at centre back then, Joe, obviously I think you've got two to choose from, unless you're whacking three in there, but I'd imagine it's two.
No, I probably should say play 4-3-3 to get all the ones I want to get in.
Okay.
Or you can choose the formation, Joe. That's fine. You're the gaffer.
Yeah.
Well, Jurgen Klopp is, but
Jurgen Klopp's the gaffer.
I'm Peplin's. So yeah, Virgil van Dijk is obviously one. Just like Alisson. I mean, Van Dijk arrived, very similar story to Alisson, big fee, and just changed Liverpool almost overnight. They went from being a really poor defensive side to a very good defensive side, and then Alisson took them on a level again. But I mean, one of the things he's got about him is just that ability to always, almost like the best players in the air, seems to be like a magnet. Every set piece he comes and heads it away. And I always remember, and he's a contender. He's not quite in the team, and I'll explain why in a minute. But Sami Hyypiä, I used to love Sami Hyypiä. I mean, he was just a colossus in terms of just brilliant. And would come and I always remember one moment from Sami Hyypiä which kind of summed him up for me. He got a head injury. I think it was against Bolton at Anfield. And they took him down the tunnel to go and give him stitches, and so he disappears. And Liverpool concede a corner or a free kick, and I always remember him jogging back right out the tunnel with this bandage on his head.
I remember this. Yeah.
Runs straight back on the pitch and cleared the immediate free kick or corner with this bandage on his head. And it was just always that ability to be there. And Van Dijk's got that, and he's got pace. He's a phenomenal passer of the ball. He scores goals, and he's just got that leadership ability. He's uber confident. He's got that Dutch swagger about him, he's just everything. And then alongside him, I don't think I can put Sammy because I just think they're too similar, and I don't think they're
too similar.
I think centre backs work well as a pairing. Daniel Agger would probably be a contender, but I just don't think perhaps has done enough through the years. He had some terrible injuries, but on his day was a really classy defender.
Yeah, he's classy.
Really well. But it's got to be Jamie Carragher. Again, Scalves knew what the club was all about. I mean, I see some of the teams now. I've seen some people put like pictures of teams online. I just think if you're leaving Carragher out, you forget what he did for the club. Go back and watch Istanbul and watch that match again. And Steven Gerrard might lead them to glory, but Carragher is there, getting his toe, getting
phenomenal,
just being there all the time,
cramping up, wasn't he?
He's and he just carries on. And then again, you go further back to the treble days, and he played left back. He's basically a right-footed centre half playing left back, and he played left back the whole season. And it was a selfless, performance throughout that season. So Jamie Carragher is the other centre half, and I think he would go well with Van Dijk, with being the sort of big little. He's not a little guy, but bigger and little. And Carragher, great tackler, last ditch. Van Dijk leading the headers and stuff like that. So
that's a pretty
my two centre halves.
That's a pretty scary centre half partnership, isn't it? That's quite formidable. I'm sure many would be getting past them. Sorry, Joe. Complete your back four.
I'll complete it. Okay. Andy Robertson, again, similar to the Trent situation, really. I mean, it speaks volumes, doesn't it, that four of the back five are all the current team. But John Arisa had a really good spell at left back. Good in the air, scored goals. Perhaps not as great defensively at times, but was a really good player. Liverpool. Bit as a fiddle, got up and down the line, and was very good. I always felt like they were looking for something extra with Risa, and I almost feel like he got sold too early. It was like they weren't quite sure about him, and obviously to say to replace him, they certainly didn't improve on him. So Andy Robertson, again, it has to be for similar reasons to Trent. Slightly different from Trent, not as refined in a footballing sense, but just unbelievably fit, gets up and down, never misses a game, is great in the tackle, and supports the attack so well, and just great cross of the ball. And quick confession: when he first came in, I didn't think he was a Liverpool player. I remember seeing him and thinking, all he does is lob crosses in. He's not. He's not good enough for this team. Couldn't have been more wrong. Couldn't have been more wrong. Happier than this. He's it was just Liverpool evolving, and I wasn't clever enough to see it. And, he's gone on to be a great player. And again, another person who's an absolute credit. So it's him.
I always remember that the clip. I remember watching it live actually at the time of when Liverpool beat City. The year City won the league and had got 100 points, and I think City were unbeaten actually at the time, and Robertson in that game just pressing. There's like a 10-15 second clip of him just pressing from the front, and he's like, he's meant to be a left back, and he's like charging after Edison and John Stones, who are like playing the ball around at the back for City, and it's just like the crowd. You can tell the crowd are like completely getting whipped up by it as well. They're completely like charging along with him almost. And he's even though he's still got obviously a lot of years ahead of him, I think he's a great shout in at left back. Just as a side note, quickly as well on Risa, I did as part of a sort of preparing for this, I had a look at a list of 100 players who shook the cop or something like that, and it was. I can't remember now what number he was in this list, but I wish I'd noted it down because Risa was surprisingly high for me. And I remember watching him play, but I didn't realise he was so loved by Liverpool fans. But perhaps he's another one who's like his reputation's got better as he's been retired and obviously left the club.
Well, in fact, I think that list was done probably at a time when Risa was still at the club, I think.
Possibly,
possibly just left. So I think his stock was very high then. And early on in his Liverpool career, was someone that come in, scored again, scored goals in the derby, scored that goal against United, and an easy way to write yourself into Liverpool fans' hearts, isn't it? But again, an underrated player, I think. Someone who, on his way out, perhaps people remember some of the bad times just before he left rather than some of the stuff he did for Liverpool. Obviously, he was a big part of the 2005 team as well. So I've got a lot of time for research.
Well, I think as a defensive unit, that's pretty formidable. And I think in the modern game as well, I think it'd be very tough to break down, obviously. And I like the pick of Jamie Carragher, which, I think people do overlook a little bit nowadays. Obviously, we see him every week on Sky. And we see him as a bit more of a media personality now, but maybe to younger viewers and listeners, maybe we overlook a little bit how good a player he was. And I think he was very much a product of Liverpool and the way I think people play the game in Liverpool. Possibly he was last ditch sometimes. He was an aggressive style of player. He was always on the attacker's heels, that sort of thing. And I think that's what endeared him to the fans. And you look back, like you said, at them clips of 2005, and he's cramping up and he's still barking orders to people on the other side of the pitch. And I used to love going to watch him because you could hear him, even with 40 or 1,000 people in there. You could still hear Jamie Carragher. Somehow, the most high pitched voice you'll ever hear. But so that's a great pick, I think, for your back four and obviously goalkeeper. So if we move on to your midfielders, you've hinted at going with a midfield three here, so I think you're very much in the Klopp mould.
Yeah, so two of the three I think are fairly easy. Obviously, I don't really need to say much about Gerrard. I haven't spoken about him at length before. He's obviously in there, the captain, by the way. And I'm putting Jordan Henderson in there because I think, again, for everything he's done for Liverpool, I just think he's been absolutely awesome. Again, someone who's fought back from a very difficult beginning, and now, he's gone full circle, hasn't he? To the sense, 180 really, in the sense that you look at him now and people fret when he's not in the team. And there was a time not that long ago, I might add, that people were looking at ways to leave him out of the team, whereas now people want him in the team. So I think that speaks volumes. He's energetic. He passes the ball very well, better I think than people give him credit for. Tempo's very good, and he's a leader. and he's a personality, which, any good team has a number of personalities. So he's going in there. And then the third one, I think, is where things get tough. Because, I think about the contenders probably are Xabi Alonso, Mascherano, Fabinho, Wijnaldum. I wouldn't say John Barnes, because I don't think I like the midfield John Barnes. The winger John Barnes would maybe, if I'd seen him properly there. But to me, this might be a little bit controversial, but I'm going to go for Didier Man. Because I think Didier was a better player than I think he gets credit for. Scored some good goals, but a very clever player, a winner. Had that cynicism about him. I think everyone remembers the Didier dive, which was basically get the ball near the corner when you're under a bit of pressure, wait for someone to touch it, hit the deck, when a free kick, relieve the pressure. He did it almost every game. He was very good at it. He had an influence on a cup final, which was, I think people can't forget about. He was very, very good coming on in Istanbul, helped Liverpool change the game and get to grips with Kaka. And again, I just think did a little bit more for Liverpool than, say, Mascherano. Mascherano was a great player, but a man won some more trophies and just did a bit more for Liverpool. I think Fabinho probably is a better footballer. I probably should pick Fabinho, but there's something that pulls on the heartstrings, perhaps because it was a younger me watching Haman. If everyone gives me grief about not picking Fabinho, I would say that I think he's definitely up there. He's definitely in the conversation. But this is my team, and I want to put Haman in it. And Alonso as well, I would say. I loved Alonso. Great player, great passer of the ball. But I just want something a bit different. So Haman, for someone to sit, to have that cynicism, and then Henderson to be a bit more of get around the pitch, breaking things up, and then Gerrard supporting the attack. I think that midfield does the trick.
You can definitely have Gerrard at his absolute best in that midfield. Certainly, Joe. You can let him be free form and almost be slightly undisciplined positional wise, and it would still work. That's a very well balanced midfield. I'd agree with that.
I think to pick Didier as well is a really good point, because people again overlook the fact that he played in a World Cup final for Germany. I think he's very much a player's player, if you like, and I think the likes of Carragher and Gerrard always speak so highly of him, and we often, if you ever watch back people who played with him, when they pick their best 11s, he's often in there, and I think that just shows the esteem he's still held in. So I think that's a really interesting suggestion. And I think you think of the players you've maybe omitted there, the likes of Alonso. We saw Alonso at a point in his career a little bit where I think that the final year he was world class, and I think he obviously gets the Real Madrid move off the back of that, but he was a bit up and down at times, I think, in the years previous, and I think maybe we gloss over that a little bit. I think people forget as well that he was nearly moved on in 2008, and Rafa was looking to bring in Gareth Barry. So I think Diddy, gave a great service to Liverpool, and I'm glad you mentioned him. And I think with Henderson as well, the story arc, if you like, of Henderson's career at Liverpool. Again, I think that's something that may get missed in the coming years, I think, with younger generations, but he did have to fight for his position a little bit at Liverpool, and you think of the time with Brendan Rodgers, he was nearly shifted out to Fulham, I think, in his first year, and he's come back and every single time won his place back. Even in the season where we come so close and City won the title, he had to win back his place essentially and play a bit further higher up in the field. So even up until recently, he was still, like you say, kind of fighting his way in. So yeah, I think that them three picks there I really like. And before we go, obviously your front three as well.
So I kind of think I've hamstrung myself by the formation here. So I do think I still haven't really decided. So I'm going to decide on the fly. So essentially, I'm sort of stuck between putting Suarez there and having Mane and Salah.
Yeah.
Or I'm torn between that and putting Fowler central, Fowler in his prime, and having Suarez and Salah. You know what, I'm going to go for the latter. I'm going to stick Fowler there, just to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
I think Fowler was, just again somebody that perhaps, somebody's overlooked wider football context, and someone who could just score every sort of goal. He could score. He could run with the ball. He could chip. He could volley. He could head. He could finish with either foot. Obviously, his left foot was lethal, but his right foot was he scored so many great goals. I always remember him scoring a volley. He scored a hat-trick at Leicester, and just high in the air. And I remember him scoring it on his weaker foot. Like a controlled volley, sort of not as good, but Zidane-esque. I just think he was such a great goal scorer. Liverpool had some other contenders. Torres was very good. Owen, people, like to forget about Owen because of what happened, but there was a time he was almost untouchable. But just Fowler was another level sort of goal scoring. A bit of a throwback as well. A proper 90s, sort of just goal scorer. And someone that as a young Joe would have fallen in love with. As you grow up, you think people who score goals. So I'm going to stick Fowler in there just to mix it up and it's a bit of nostalgia. I'm going to stick Suarez slightly out of position on the left of the front three. Sorry, Sadio is also a great player, but Suarez was just something else. I think we spoke about it before, but it was just like some of the stuff he did. He was just ridiculous. Like you think back to that 2014 season, the Norwich game, those 4 goals when he had his own goal of season competition. Header against West Brom. He was just
outside the box.
And then he scored little tap-ins as well at times. So Suarez and then Salah. And I think it's a bit of a toss-up between Salah and Mane, because Mane started hitting those heights goal scoring wise in recent seasons and probably does more for the team in terms of tracking back. But I think Salah, I hope when he does leave Liverpool, people look back at him as one of the greatest goal scorers in Premier League history. I think they should. I think he almost gets forgotten in the conversation because of the position he plays, because he has a tendency to look a bit sloppy, which is sometimes a bit weird, but he's the type of guy who can scuff a shot 1 minute and then put it in the top corner the next. His goal scoring record just speaks for itself, doesn't it? Even this season, he's hit the ground running, and I kind of like that he's taken on penalties. I think it's another side of it. Someone who's ruthless, wants to score as many goals as possible. But he's obviously worked on his penalties and taken that up a level. So I love Mohamed Salah. I just think he's
an ultimate match winner.
Liverpool's crowd. Yeah, exactly. They're the sort of players, with respect to everyone else, that they're the sort of players that I think kids love. And when kids fall in love with football, they fall in love with goal scorers, and there's a reason for that. And Salah is that sort of player. I'm pretty sure my little boy turned 2 yesterday. I'm pretty sure that if he was a touch older, he'd be saying, "Daddy, can I have Salah on the back of the shirt?"
Definitely.
And I think you've got to love those sorts of players. So he completes my front three. Before you move on, I want to throw someone on the bench. I'm getting Emileski on the bench.
I knew he'd come in, Joe. I thought you was going to put him on the left wing, like Julio at one point.
Could have done crossing for Bruno. Just so I can get him off the bench. When this team sweeps all before it's about to complete the quadruple, I can get him off the bench.
Super sub. Yeah, well, you picked a fantastic team there, Joe, and I think I love that you put in Fowler because, like you say, he was a street footballer who you fall in love with football. That front three, I think, for across the generations now, I think they're the types, like you say, where you fall in love with football because of them, the match winners, and the three are my favourite players as well, so I'm happy you picked them. Just to round up on it, Joe's gone for Steven Gerrard as his greatest ever player. Greatest ever cult hero was Gary McAllister. His greatest manager was Jurgen Klopp, and his greatest team was Alisson Becker in goal, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Virgil van Dijk, Jamie Carragher, and Andrew Robertson in the back four. Jordan Henderson, Steven Gerrard and Didier Mann in midfield, and Mo Salah, Robbie Fowler and Luis Suarez up front. So if I was Peter McDowell then, and we were bringing out that 11, I think we'd be delighted, wouldn't we? But I think that's a fantastic lineup, isn't it, Jack?
Oh, that is a stellar lineup. I think that team would be, you'd be struggling against that team for certain. I particularly like as well that Joe's picked a very balanced, like the midfield is balanced and it allows for a very attacking front line. And I think sometimes when you see people pick these 11s, and we'll probably get a few during the series, they just pick a sort of a team that could never work cohesively on
essentially
the pitch.
6 up front.
Yeah, but I think that they'll pick a back 3 and then just have like 2 fullbacks in the centre half, for example. But I think that
Steve McManaman at left wing back.
Yeah, but at least Joe's done completely the opposite of that. That is a team that could be put out on and would do very well even into today. I think a lot of those players would be pushing. The ones who aren't from the current Liverpool team would be definitely looking to get in there. So yeah, very, very good.
Yeah, I've just noticed really that there's a very Scouse heartbeat in it. Carragher, Gerrard, Trent,
spine,
and Fowler. So nice Scouse spine, which I'm pretty pleased about. Because that wasn't by design, but that's what a Liverpool team should be all about, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I think you're right there on the Scouse point as well. I think we always look at them players first, don't we, in the team, and they do become the heroes. Whether we've got Salah or Mane or whoever it is now. For me, I always look at the likes of Trent, and you sort of, even now at 23, 24, you envisage yourself a little bit, and you see them living that life a little bit, particularly when you're a kid. And I think that's what, like you touched on with the Fowler point, especially as a kid, it sort of brings the game alive for you. So yeah, you've been a fantastic guest, Joe, and thanks a lot for coming on.
Yeah, massive thanks for coming on, Joe.
Cheers, Joe. So yeah, that rounds up our first episode. Hopefully we've got some other fantastic guests to come on the show. But yeah, give us a bit of feedback on our Apple Podcast page and also on Twitter. If you can find us on there, it's @goat_podcast_. But yeah, until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me as well.
Alright, cheers. Bye bye.